And it affects the realtors, it affects every single person because realtors are mom and pop. They got mom and pop businesses. They rely on this. Yeah, they may be commission driven, but at the tail end of the day, they're the exact same thing as the average mom and dad homeowner. And therein lies the problem. Documents that are irrefutably ignored. I've read every single one of these, including USPAP. USPAP's a 384-page document. Nothing wrong with USPAP. Its biggest problem is nobody's ever read it. So when you start stacking all this information, what you really have is an illusion of legitimacy. Your school districts are bankrupt. It was clearly stated multiple times, not just by me. That's what happened last week. So you're being asked to pay for taxes for the mistakes and the sins of the people of the past who have committed this fraud. And when I say this is fraud, this has got multiple problems, state and federal levels. It turns into RICO at the tail end of the day, because under RICO, when somebody creates a debt and holds a gun to your head and says, pay my debt or I'm going to shoot you, that's the definition of RICO. It is the exact same thing as I created a debt, you're the property owner, pay the taxes, and if you don't, I will take the house from you. Now, here's how perverse it gets. Never mind the school districts. Watch this one. Walk it through. So if you've got somebody that says, I'm going to pay these taxes or I'm going to lose my house. Okay, I can't pay it, I don't have the money, I lose the house. What just happened at the tax district level? So the tax bill that they would have received is maybe $3,500, right? They take the house and they auction the house. And when they take the house, they auction the house, what just happened? Well, the tax receipt went from maybe $3,500, depending on the value of the home, whatever it is. And let's say the district now has an extra $100,000 in their pocket because they auctioned the house. They don't give a damn what it's sold for because the next person who comes in is going to end up paying the taxes. But in the meantime, they got a boost of $100,000 to the coffers. You see the problem? Straight up RICO. It conforms to all 4 criteria under RICO. So when people want to bury their head, you can do whatever you want, but this is coming to a neighborhood near you momentarily. It's already there.
So I know that you said that bonds are levered and against the assets. Do you mind just walking the general public through how does the bond and the comptroller, how does that piece work, and what's the liability look like for me and you as a homeowner?
Okay, so let's back up on that for a second. Let's talk about the state comptroller and the property valuation study. Well, the state comptroller adds another layer of fraud to this. This does go to the state comptroller. I've mentioned his name multiple times. It's Glenn Hagar. I don't know the man, don't really care, but I'm telling you that there are real big problems here because the state comptroller turns around and he goes to the chief appraisers of every district and says, I need more money. Well, okay, here's the problem. State comptroller-in-law has no authority whatsoever to set property values. State comptroller-in-law has no authority whatsoever to go to a CAD on a predetermined budget created under the property valuation study, which is taking money from one school district to pay another school district. It sounds good in theory. It looks good on paper. The problem is the state comptroller has no authority in law to set a property value. In essence, he is setting the property value. That's a whole other layer of fraud over and above what the CADs are doing. That's 2 layers of fraud right there. Now, to your other point on the bonds, well, here's a real interesting layer of fraud. So who are the bondholders? Pensions. Who are the pensioners? Mom and pop. So not only are mom and pop going to get screwed over on their house, because that's happening in reality in real time, but when those bonds default, then mom and pop are going to get smacked again. They're going to lose their pensions. So you've got multiple layers of fraud happening here. That's 3 layers of fraud, and it's taken me less than 10 minutes right here to break it down. So on the bonds, it gets sick, really sick. So what happens with the bond, let's say the receipt to LISD, and I'm not picking on LISD, they're one of many, but just use LISD. So LISD gets $1 million in receipts of the tax revenue, okay? They then take that $1 million and they lever it up 20 to 1.
stop right there. Go into that. That's the part I'm curious about. When you say lever, what does that mean? They're
They put a mortgage on it.
at 20 times the amount?
20 is a normal amount on a bond.
Is it really?
Yeah, well, it's no different than your mortgage. What do you do on your mortgage? You got a 30-year AM.
Well, that doubles, but that's not 20 times. Am I misunderstanding it?
No, it's 20 times because they can roll up and they roll out. So there's a cumulative compounding effect going on even on the bonds. But the underlying problem is there's no money to pay for the bonds today. Never mind in the case of LISD, the $1.7 billion that they were just approved by the state to go and raise. In November 2023, they got approval to go raise another $1.7 billion. There's no money to pay the bonds today, but for the fraud that is being committed by the CADs to pay for the, like I said, the past sins of what's happened here. So on a 20-to-1 levered basis, doesn't matter, 15-to-1, pick a number, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There's no money to pay for it.
Obviously. Is that?
No. So the bonds are used by a school district. So let's stay on the school district just for a second.
Sure.
So the bonds are used by a school district. You know they have bonds for roofs, bonds for glass, bonds for driveways, bonds for improvements, bonds for stadiums. So we studied LISD. I studied it in great detail. And to say that it is a spaghetti bowl of everything under the sun with different timelines, different due dates, different interest rates, it's a spaghetti bowl. It would literally take a forensic accountant at least a month to go through that to figure out what that crap really is and what the value is. But here's the point. There is no value. What do you think a stadium is worth if you want to sell a stadium? If you take $100 million and build a stadium, what do you think it's worth the day you're finished? There's no receipts other than the tax receipts from the taxpayers. What do you think a school is worth when the day is finished? Zero. It's a land that's under the school. So there aren't any assets backing this up other than the implicit, as the government has created, guarantee of the taxpayers. And we know that 37% of the households don't have the money to pay anything.
But what I don't understand, Mitch, and maybe you can help me understand, is if you're taxing the public and then you're getting these bonds, why do we need the bonds if you're collecting on our taxes?
Because they're spending money they don't have. You're right. You're absolutely right. They're spending money they don't have. They're spending money they don't need. And therein lies the problem, and that's the fraud. So watch this one.
You're making me mad. Sorry. Good, go ahead.
The school districts, do you know that they have a budgetary meeting with the CADs? So the chief appraisers of the CADs,
No, I didn't.
yeah, they're handed a predetermined budget. You want to know how fraudulent this is? When a school district, again, let's go back to LISD, walks into Mr. Spencer's office, or they say, come on, let's go for lunch, let's go for dinner, let's talk about this. They hand him a predetermined budget that says this is the amount of money we need. Don Spencer's not mathematically capable of breaking it down. That's his marching orders. He just simply says, okay, I got my number, I got to go get the number. I defy anybody on this planet to explain to me and give me the proof on how a predetermined budget has anything to do with USPAP. And the answer is it doesn't. And therein is the other layer of fraud. We're up to 4.
Taking me through that, I have a question.
This is the property valuation study. This is how money is being spent. And if you read this carefully, this literally says 0.
What do you mean 0?
The property valuation study is a scheme. It's not real.
What is it exactly, if you don't mind indulging our viewers?
It's the state comptroller, Glenn Hagar's office, manipulating the facts and saying we have to move money from this school district to that school district.
Robin Hood program type thing?
It's all sorts of stuff. And like I said, on paper, it sounds great. And in its theory, just like the creation of the Fed way back in the Depression, in theory, it sounds great.
Is that something that's legal through our legislature, that they do these?
Well, they set the program up that's legal. The problem is the math isn't. The problem is there's no justification. There's 0 law that says you, Mr. Hagar, can set property values. There's 0 law that says you, Mr. Hagar, can go to a chief appraiser and demand that he go and increase property values over and above what the CAD has already done, which we already know is fraudulent. And then we even have the evidence that Don Spencer has gone to certain communities and targeted those communities. Pilot Point, Aubrey, Sanger, a subdivision that I built. They're specifically targeted. How do we know they're targeted? Because their tax rates, the average tax rate, let's say, went up in 2023 at 24%. Well, there's subdivisions and properties in those communities I just mentioned that have gone up 40, 50, 60% above the median. If it's truly the median, then the median would be applied to everybody. How do you explain in these communities that these values have skyrocketed when they don't even have the population growth that, say, Flower Mound, Double Oak have? There's no justification for it. There's no math to back them up. Ergo, they were targeted. Why? As a direct result of the property valuation study at the hands of the state comptroller.
So, but are we saying that they're selectively enforcing or targeting those areas because they feel they have the means to carry these other districts?
No, because they can, and nobody's gone after them for it. Nobody's been able to prove it. This is the first time that we know of where the evidence actually exists. People know that there's problems. People in their daily lives, they know they have problems with paying these real estate taxes. It's gotten so bad they have to decide, okay, do I pay the rent? Do I pay the taxes? Do I put food on the table, or do I buy medicine for my kid? Because the money just simply isn't there. So you have some people that say, okay, it's not that big a deal, but those people are fairly well-to-do people as compared to the majority of the population. But even the fairly well-to-do people cannot hide from this, because as I've said, what do you think is going to happen to your business when 30,000 single-family homes in that $400,000 to $300,000 tax bracket, or less, 200, hit the market at the same time? You understand the economic devastation?
Absolutely, actually I do, yeah. It's not good.
And that's a reality.
That's horrible. Well, and especially what feeds that is, I mean, most of the average people that you talk to here that, well, we'll just say under $1 million, they're feeling it.
They haven't paid their taxes for this year yet.
Right.
But it's even worse. So you see, they get screwed because the servicers of the mortgages that have the PID in them, okay? So the people that have those type of mortgages, they actually get screwed because what does the government do, the servicer do? Well, they look at the CADs. Well, your value for the taxes is X. They're being forced to pay those taxes one way or the other in advance, and the number is wrong. The number's fraud. So you see the problem, it's cumulative. That's why I keep using that word. It's cumulative compounding. And not only that, if you look at Jeremy Bago's video, Jeremy's hammering on FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, HUD, and they're all guilty because, in fact, they're forcing the appraisers, they're literally telling the appraiser, you come to this number or you're fired.
And I asked him, he's a 30-year-old person, he's going to get married, he's found the woman of his life, he'd love to buy a house, he asked a great question. Why is this relevant to me? You know, like, I don't own a home. Why should I care? And I asked him, I said, well, I'm like, what's your rent right now? He gave me an address. We looked up the taxes. And I said, if that's overvalued, your rent, the landlord is going to pass those taxes to you. And while he was in the middle of being shocked by that, we were sitting in a commercial office upstairs, and I said, it was my biggest aha yesterday, Mitch, was the commercial guy. I understood, as you had said, and that the landlord passes those taxes on, and they collect those taxes forward. So the yogurt shop across the street owes triple net, and that tax burden of the owner is passed down to the tenants. And my question was to the commercial guy, as I said, why aren't the owners of these buildings concerned about this? Like you said, my tenants have to have the ability to stay. You know, are you experienced? I'm asking him, do you have owners that are actually feeling the pain of this at all? And surprising to us, he said, not really. And I'm shocked by that. But then he had an aha moment and goes, well, wait a minute, you're right. Sounds like the future's going to happen. I was like, look, the building's 40% occupied next door. This one's like 30-something.
There you go.
You know, I'm like...
See, people make comments without understanding, because this problem is extremely deep, right? This goes all the way to the state comptroller's office. So anybody that says, well, nobody's hurting, well, yeah, you can look outside and say, hey, you know, the sky is blue and everything's great today and it's all rosy. Now, stop for a second and look at your neighborhood strip center. Look at the fact that it's probably, give or take, around 30% empty. All you got to do is go to California. Do you know in the last 11 months they've lost 4,000 restaurants?
You said that.
You know, this stuff is not rosy. Open your eyes and you will start seeing. With regard to your friend who is going to want to go buy a house, speaking to that issue specifically, there are still some bidding wars going on in certain areas. Well, let's talk about that math for a second. So somebody comes in and says, I'm going to overpay for this house by $100,000. It's $1 million home. They buy it for $1.1 million. They don't understand what they just signed up for. See, if your house is 40% overvalued, you understand that that buyer is going to take a $500,000 bullet. Now, what happens if one of them loses a job? The $500,000 bullet is coming faster.
GFC all over again.
That's where we are. So the point is, and what I'm trying to hammer down on this for the benefit of mom and pop, is get your financial house, get your balance sheet in order. The reason why we're saying eliminate the property taxes, because if you could flip the switch, right? Mom and pop would have an asset. The asset would be the house. That's the most important asset. The idea that somebody can overtax by overvaluing completely fraudulently that house and say, give me the money or I'll take it, is the definition of RICO. What I'm trying to do is flip the switch so that mom and pop can truly build an asset where nobody can take the land underneath the house. What in essence you are doing right now, the world, nationally and in Canada, by ignoring USPAP, you've created a land lease. You've created a ground lease. You're forcing people to pay on a ground lease. Well, guess what? The War of 1812 was fought over that exact issue. It was the British that came in and said, we're going to charge you a tax. The Americans, about to be Americans, said, yeah, no, because you're not delivering value for it, screw you. And poof, instant war. We are at the exact same point. The money doesn't exist to pay what's in the realm of the mob would be called the VIG. Through lawsuits, they are the responsible party in law. So the chief appraiser is the responsible party in law for the CAD. Mm-hmm. The ARB members, on the other hand, if they violate the law, that's a separate set of lawsuits. The RPAs can also be sued for perjury. And what we're stating now is when you get taken advantage of, if you've got the money and you know there's a problem, sue everybody in sight because they've got it coming. If you got them on perjury, sue them. Press criminal charges. You can file criminal charges against an RPA for perjury. You can do these things. You've got the power.
So these are rights available to the average homeowner.
Right. Now, do you really want to haul off and do that on something that's a $300,000 home? No, because it doesn't pay. However, when you're talking commercial properties and the income calculation worksheets created by the CADs are another straight up fraud, well, we think your income should be this, we think your expenses should be this, and we're going to give you a cap rate that's lower than everything else. If I walked into a bank with what they've created, within 30 days I would be arrested for bank fraud. So even on the commercial property side, they're committing fraud. On the residential side, they're committing fraud. And to that point, this is a 10-page list of laws that are being broken by these CADs. And although certain states have different laws, the bottom line is you can kind of substitute out one of the columns. But this goes into federal law, state law, USPAP being broken, Texas property tax code being violated, one after another. It's 10 pages of this. Ask yourself this: how is this possible but for intent? They intend to commit fraud. They don't give a damn about the law. It's clear. We've got them. We've got them on tape saying so. Right. This is the net result right here. 10 pages.
Questions, kind of a bonus round, if that's all right. Qualified immunity. Do you mind educating the public on what that is and
right.
What is it?
So qualified immunity basically says, well, we work for the government, you can't do a damn thing about it. But you have to separate the government aspect of it, the entity, from the people. Oh, there's plenty of case law that you can chase the people. You can go after the people for the actual damages. Okay? You can go after Don Spencer. You can go after the ARB members. They don't want to talk about that. But here's the problem with their statement. Qualified immunity is based on not having discretion, okay? So the word discretion is really important because USPAP, you don't have discretion not to use USPAP. You're mandated by the Texas Property Tax Code to use USPAP. You're mandated by the Texas Constitution under uniform and equal to use USPAP. You're mandated to use the Texas Property Tax Code. You are mandated to use the Texas Constitution, and you sure as you know what better be adhering to the US Constitution. So the bottom line is this nonsense is being spouted while we have qualified immunity. Yeah, no, you don't. You want to have it, and I just in last night's video, I even said, you want to have a debate? I'll give you 15-to-1 odds. You pick the best orators you've got against little old nobody me. I'll buy the cappuccinos. We'll have a debate in front of the public. We'll find a place that'll hold several thousand people, and you explain exactly how it is, what the math is under USPAP that you're adhering to. Because I've got gigabytes of data that proves you're not. Let's have a debate, straight up. I believe in the First Amendment. I will support your right. I will be happy to have you, Mr. Don Spencer. Come on, let's have a talk. Now, I know full well they won't do it, but that's not the point. What are you afraid of? I'm a nobody.
You're Joe Taxpayer. And can you give the viewers a sense of how big is this problem actually?
You know, the judge in our last hearing, we're in the appellate court now, but before that, that judge made a comment, and he said, this is a societal issue. And I knew that judge got it right on the spot. He sees, and he read the briefs. So the answer to your question is, this truly is a societal issue. This truly is about fraud under the hood. And we now have at least one signature from 47 different states. So the point is, it's national and it's international in scope. And the theft of the taxpayers has to stop. People's balance sheets, their own personal balance sheet. I look at a person as being a business, right? If they understand that they were a business, then it would say, okay, I've got my income, I've got my expenses, I know how much money I've got left to spend, and then I have clarity because I'm looking at this through a balance sheet. The problem with most people, they don't even understand how to do that and why it's so important for them. Because if you know that you're being taken advantage of and you can articulate it, you're in a whole different category where you can stand in front of these ARB members and say, okay, fine. If you disagree with my math, Mr. or Ms. ARB person, show me why you disagree, which you can't because we know their databases are corrupt. And oh, by the way, if you don't do it as it is we're saying, I'll find 4 or 5 other people and we'll sue you. See, if you can get 4 or 5 people together, then all of a sudden the cost of suing isn't so bad. Then it starts to make sense. All of a sudden, okay, you know, I got 4 people. We total up the houses. It's $2 million. Yeah, is it worth $4,000 or $5,000 to file the suit? Yeah, it is.
Right.
Class action suits. What they say is we want people to have like-kind damages. Well, if you got a person with a $200,000 home or a person with a $2 million home, they would say that's not like-kind. I would completely argue because the thread is the fraud that's being created.
Right.
Okay. With that said, at some point, is a class action feasible? Yes, but here's the problem. I believe this is headed for the Supreme Court of the United States, which is where I wanted it to go right from the word go in 2016. But you have to go through this series of steps in order to get it there. Well, if you do a class action, you'll win. The facts are the facts. The facts are irrefutable. The fraud being committed is irrefutable. The problem is there's no money to pay the damages. So we may be in the right position at the right time to actually get this into the Supreme Court. We'll ratchet it up. I mean, potentially it could turn into a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against the state of Texas, because the state of Texas, if they keep punting this, have in fact proven that the state of Texas did an end run around its own constitution, and that is a violation of the 11th Amendment under the US Constitution under the Supremacy Clause. Now, the damages associated with that model, just in Denton County alone, will be treble damages on $1.34 billion stolen at Denton County. Now, you start ratcheting it up to the real numbers, and you can actually back into the math to see that this is actually a multi-trillion-dollar problem. You can't collect, right? So who's going to pay for Denton County? Let's say we win. Let's say the Supreme Court says, yeah, $5.2 billion, $6.2 billion, pick the number, I don't care. You win. You think the state of Texas has got $5.2 billion in extra cash sitting around to cover off Denton County? No. But you see, that makes my point. It's all bankrupt. That literally proves that it's a giant circle. It literally proves that the system is bankrupt. And if the system is bankrupt and there is no protection for mom and pop under the 5th and 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, which is due process, because the system is rigged. When you go into an ARB hearing, they don't give a damn what's coming out of your mouth. They don't give a damn what evidence you're presenting. They just violated your 5th and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution. Now you get 4 or 5 people that say, you know something, screw you. We'll go sue and we'll take you into the U.S. Supreme Court for violating those amendments. Now we've got some power. That's the whole purpose of putting this stuff out. And the more states that get involved, the more district attorneys that get involved, the more sheriffs that get involved. And in fact, there's actually a sheriff, a fellow who's running for sheriff. His name is Kevin Henry in Brazoria County. Do you know that he's running on the platform, Investigate the CADs? That's his platform for running. The guy's real. So the point of the matter is, the more people that get on board and understand what's going on here and how these laws all work in tandem and how the laws are being stripped and hidden from the taxpayers are tantamount to RICO. They can't get away from it. They can't get away from the U.S. constitutional laws that they violated. And that's what's on this 10 pages. I mean, I've got the constitutional laws sitting in here. I've got the Texas Property Tax Code 2301E, 2301B sitting here. Every single law. And you can take this and replicate it across multiple states. They cannot get away from this. Nobody can.
Will we have access? Do you feel like some of these things are helpful to us that we could show some of our clients and homeowners and other agents?
Yes, and you know, the clients, the realtors, because this is all hands on deck, but the realtors have to understand what's happening to them, and it's happening to their lives. The realtors are no different than mom and pop. So, you know, they earn their income, but then they take their income and they spend it on their houses. So everybody is hooked at the hip on this. Everybody is getting ripped off. I don't care if you're in a multi-million-dollar home or a $200,000 home. Sure. You're losing your money. You're losing your wealth because they, in essence, have created a land lease, a ground lease. That's what they've done.
Mitch, I want to go back to one thing. The word bankruptcy. Was it you that sent that video? I thought I saw that there was a county in Missouri that recently lost a case to an appraisal case and had to write. They owe 60,000 taxpayers refunds.
Yeah.
And that person was bankrupt. Please tell us about that.
That's just
Is that relevant to any of this?
It's 100% relevant. And that is exactly the point of, okay, we'll go to the Supreme Court. If we have to turn it into a multi-billion, that's great, we'll win.
In that Missouri case?
That Missouri case was the exact same thing, where the court came in and said, yeah, you stole the money from these people. Pay it back. But again, there's no money to pay it back. You're back to that circular argument. You're guilty. Where are we going to get the money to pay it back? Well, we have to raise the real estate taxes to pay it back? That isn't going to happen. So now they're all freaking out. Now the judge did the right thing. He's 100% right. Nobody bothered to look at the math under the hood that says, okay, great. This is a multi-billion-dollar judgment. How are we going to get paid? Lots of luck. It's Missouri.
Right. So what happened? Back up. What actually happened in that case? Was it somebody like you?
Yes.
That looked under the hood? And
yes. And it's almost identical to what we're talking about here. I mean, there's always idiosyncrasies, but it's almost identical in that the judge realized that the taxpayers were overcharged because the evidence that was presented showed that the CADs created fraud. Okay. He was able to connect the dots. The judge was right. The ramifications of being right are that now there's a multi-billion-dollar judgment against that district that can't be paid. And that comes right back to what I was saying about the school districts.
So what are they going to do? I mean, obviously, the guy said, we don't have the money to pay. So what are they going to do? Not tax? Because you can't ask somebody for money that you owe.
The answer is eliminate the property taxes effective immediately. That's the only answer. There is no other answer.
But these cities, I mean, these county cities, they need money to operate on their schools.
No
right?
problem. When you eliminate the property taxes, you eliminate the fat in the middle. In the case of Denton Central Appraisal District, they got 80 some odd employees. 80 will disappear and get knocked down to 8 because they become, instead of creating a subjective value, they can now only push paper that is objective. You get the fat out of the middle. All these real estate tax consultants, gone. All that fat, when people say, here's 30%, we're going to pay you 30% to go and argue our taxes, gone. That's money left in the homeowner's pockets. Okay? The system has to be destroyed because it's not a system. If the system is based on RICO, it's not a system. So what do? Well, you substitute what is quantifiable. What's quantifiable? Here, I go to the store, I buy a pen. I go to the store, I buy a chocolate bar. I buy 2x4s. It's quantifiable. It's a sales tax, right? It's not subjective, it's objective. And when you have something that's objective, it doesn't matter who it is. Mom and pop, who's maybe not be that sophisticated, they want to say, I want to go build a deck. Okay, well that deck would normally cost you a couple $1,000. Now it's going to cost you $2,300, but it's quantifiable. The problem that we're looking at here, this is like fighting a ghost, because none of this, I mean, everything they've done is a straight up illusion. It's an illusion of legitimacy. They don't know any of these things. Can you imagine if I put Don Spencer on the stand, which I would love to do live, never mind the deposition. Pick a document, I don't care. He can't answer a single question coming out of any of these documents because he never read them. Yet this is from the IAAO, International Association of Assessing Officers, TAAO, Texas Association of Assessing Officers, Texas Property Tax Code. Hell, that property valuation study, he hasn't read it. Nobody in these CADs has read any of this stuff because they don't give a damn. Chris Luttrell stands up in front of the board and says, well, we're doing what we were taught to do. Great, Mr. Luttrell, I got a question for you. If you were taught to commit murder, does that make it legal? By the way, Mr. Luttrell, ignorance of the law isn't an excuse. And that comes right back to this document here, 10 pages.
Which again, what document again is that?
That's the violations document.
Okay.
So the point of the matter is, they're caught on any one of these. I don't care who you look at, the RPAs, the ARB panels, chief appraiser, deputy chief appraisers, they're caught. They can't get out of this. So the answer to your question is, yeah, the judge in Missouri did absolutely the right thing. Problem is, there's no math, and that proves my point. If there's no math to back up your mouth and back up the fraud that you committed, you got away with it. Therefore, the system is totally corrupt, and the only solution is eliminate the property taxes and put the power and the money back in the balance sheets of mom and pop. The house that they're working for should never be allowed to be stolen from underneath them, ever.
You have a federal court case in Denton County, right?
We have a constitutional case working its way through, and it's now in the hands of the Tarrant Appellate Court.
Okay.
So with regard to what's happening
In your case.
at the Tarrant Appellate Court, it really comes down to a very simple premise. Based on this discussion, either the law exists or it doesn't. And that, in essence, is what is in front of the court. Now, there's a whole bunch of documents and all sorts of statements being made.
But
Both
who are you in the case against?
Denton Central Appraisal District and Don Spencer individually. And that doesn't prohibit me from filing additional lawsuits against all sorts of people for the 2024 cases because they step right back into it in the year 2024. So they've got multiple problems coming, which is why I keep saying, ideally, I'd like to have this at the Supreme Court, but I believe the appellate court will do what's right. I believe we will win, and that will get pushed back into the local Denton court, and we'll see what happens there. Again, this is part of that process that I'm not happy about, and it's very time-consuming and it's expensive. But the bottom line is we are where we are. Either the law exists or it doesn't. Either there is due process under the Fifth and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution, or there isn't. And if they win, then there is no law because they've just, 10 pages say there is no law and they're violating it. So therefore, if there is no due process and fraud is being committed on a rampant scale because of all the bankruptcies underneath the hood where the fraud is being created to cover up the bankruptcies, which is what this is, then there is no law. If there is no law, then please explain to me why any of us are paying property taxes. Do you know,
right or wrong?
in one of our lawsuits, 2 or 3 years ago, there was what's called a Rule 11 agreement. The Rule 11 agreement was that defense counsel agreed, we will turn over all the mathematical formulas to you. That never happened. They violated the Rule 11 agreement.
And this is Denton County?
This is Denton County. Over and above that, you have to understand something that's crucial here. Don Spencer stood in front of the board under threat of perjury and literally said, we took 60,000 properties out of the database, manipulated them, and put them back. Do you understand what that means?
No, I don't.
Because that is the violation of what you were just asking me. In other words, you can have everything you want in USPAP, and it doesn't matter because he overwrote it. The lady who did it, her name was Rebecca Townsend. A, what business do you have taking anything out of a database, manipulating it and putting it back? B, how did you even know that you could do it? C, were the 60,000 the right number? Probably not. How long have you been doing it, Mr. Spencer? How long has Rebecca been manipulating the data? For how many years? You see the problem? It's all connected. They don't give a damn about USPAP. They don't give a damn about the income or appraisal process because it's got nothing to do with the goal. The goal is steal as much money as you can to cover up the fraud that we've created over multiple years.
No, but the case itself.
Oh, the case itself is real simple, members of the court, your honors. Either the law exists or it doesn't.
The chief appraiser and everybody under should be following, correct?
Should be following or put in jail. They're not following it. It's clear they're not following it. We've got a mountain of, there's gigabytes of evidence here. Right. They're not following it. Arrest them, let the public sue them for the damages. And by the way, under RICO, you can actually do that. You can actually go back and take the assets. See, if they have a house, they bought a house, you can go and get their house. You flip the switch. They've been stealing from everybody else, flip the switch.
Wow. This leads me to one of my last questions. Whistleblowers or people that are coming forward to confirm a lot of what you're saying?
She actually got on the ARB and spent 6 years undercover, working as a mole to document this. She knew that the system was corrupt. Wow. I didn't know her.
Wow. I
had no knowledge of her.
Wow.
But through this process, she floated up. But she is the real deal. She's a mole. The file she sent has over 11,000 properties in it that the state comptroller is fully aware of. In her case, told the attorneys at the state comptroller's office, stand down. I was told by the FBI to file my complaints with the state comptroller over and above TDLR and TALCB, which I did. The response was, we don't have the authority to enforce. I want to show this to you. This is basically what the FBI wishes they could put together. This was put together for the benefit of the judge. Wow. Everything that's in blue, that's highlighted in blue, is a live link to the evidence. On this column right here is the state comptroller. And at the bottom of that column in red says no enforcement. That word no enforcement occurs on several of these categories of what these job descriptions are. This lines up the people, the job description. These are all the co-conspirators involved in Denton Central Appraisal District.
I'm going to call this video, Where is the Math?
Everything in yellow, by the way, these are the people that signed an oath. You know what an oath of office says? To protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America and the state of Texas. Please explain to me how any of these people have not broken their oath. They've clearly violated their oath. They're clearly involved in a criminal conspiracy to defraud the public. They're caught. There is no way out. And the only mechanism to fix this system is to shut it down. This cannot be fixed.
We understand now clearly what they are doing. What I think the public wonders is what they should be doing. How should these CADs be determining value?
Absolutely. The law is clear. USPAP is a good document. There's nothing wrong with it. We've pulled it apart. We built mathematical models based on USPAP. There's something called standard deviation. I mean, you can call it Gaussian channel, you can call it all sorts of things. But do you know that inside of USPAP, it's a requirement? Standard deviation is a requirement. Do you know that it's actually mentioned in the Texas Property Tax Code? It's a requirement. Well, standard deviation is a Gaussian channel. And what it says is that if something is an outlier, it would be, in the case of a USPAP, outside of a half standard deviation. So USPAP says you can be plus or minus 10% one way or the other on the value. Okay, and that's perfectly fine, as long as the values that you're looking at are like kind. How do you determine what is like kind? Well, the thing with the Gaussian channel, and we use standard deviation in virtually every single thing we do. When we're under construction, we use it. And then we extrapolate standard deviation and we roll it into Monte Carlo analysis. And then we can roll it into Black-Scholes formula to determine values. So we can get into all sorts of sophisticated levels of how to use it. But the point is that a standard deviation, USPAP requires 10% up or down, and that'll tell you that you're fairly close. And then you can tweak, just like you were saying, you can tweak it from there. You can't tweak something that's outside of that 10% bracket, up or down. Well, in a standard deviation, that 10% is the equivalent of a half standard deviation move. The purpose of that is to say, okay, if I've got something that's one standard deviation over here, okay, I got to get rid of it because that's not in a half standard. 2 standard, I got to get rid of it. 3, I got to get rid of it. It's not real. Well, on my building, just as an example, okay, my office building, we won the lawsuits at $750,000, multiple years in a row.
Right.
They've turned around the following year, 2024, and now bumped it to $2.8 million. Okay, that's a 4 standard deviation move. A year prior, or 3 years prior, we found an 8 standard deviation move. You know what the odds of an 8 standard deviation move are? 1 in 390 billion. Here's the problem. There's only 510,000 tax accounts in Denton County. Ergo, fraud. And that's why I keep saying there's no fix for this. They're lying, they're using subjective values, they're not adhering to USPAP, they're not adhering to a single appraisal standard ever written, and they don't care because they've been able to get away with it until challenged recently. And that's why we're hammering so hard. We're trying to get mom and pop to be able to stand up for themselves and say, we're not going to take this anymore, we're going to fix it, and we will sue everybody in sight in order to stop it, or at some point, the government stand up and simply say, okay, we've had enough, we're going to shut it down, and we're going to return the power back to the people. And that money keeps circulating. Don't make any mistake. I mean, taxes have to get paid. All I'm saying is they have to be quantifiable. And you've got to leave mom and pop alone. The idea you can steal their house from underneath them, go to hell. I'm thankful that people are beginning to pay attention. But there are 144 million houses in the United States, and I don't see any reason why every single homeowner should not know about these videos, and I see no reason why every single homeowner should not be able to stand in front of an ARB and defend your property's values using like-kind comparisons that are in your neighborhood, which the CADs are not creating. The CADs do not have the right, under any circumstance, to pick comparisons that are not comparisons under USPAP or in the Texas Property Tax Code or under the Texas Constitution. And the same is said for every state in the union. No CAD, nobody in a CAD, including the RPAs, have any right to pick a comparison that is not a comparison to your property. If you can assemble a grid, you can look at the math and you can walk into a CAD and defend your position. And that's the whole purpose of why we're hammering and pushing out these videos, is to help mom and pop be able to stand up and defend themselves. That's the A part. The B part is to simply state property taxes on property straight across the board, be it commercial or houses, have to be eliminated, because that puts your balance sheet at your house back where it should be. Think of yourself as a business. You have income, you have expenses, you have assets. As a business, you're entitled to own the land under your feet to shore up your long-term financial health. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. The petition exists for all homeowners and commercial owners to sign. The reason why we're doing that petition is to be able to show the judges that this is not Mitch Vexler. This is the Americans that own property, and they are telling you, judges, the system is broken. The more people that sign that petition, the more I can push on that point in front of the judges. And it's crucial because I want to be able to use that in front of those judges, simply to state that. These are real people. This is mom and pop signing this petition, taking the time necessary to sign it. And most of the people that are signing it have issues. We're getting emails by the day. We're getting emails by the hour. It's real. The problem exists. It's across the United States. And eventually that will be the power of that petition. Those people who have the privilege to know, which you now are one of those people, whether you realize it or not, by watching these series of videos, you will have more knowledge and more education than any of these CAD people across the United States. And those who have the privilege to know have a duty to help. You've got friends that are in harm's way. You have family that are in harm's way. You yourself are in harm's way. You've got the duty to help.
We are curious, what is it that drives you to get up every day and face this animal,
Well, I was forced to leave a country, which was Canada, because a guy like me didn't fit in. My uncles were in the multifamily business, which was World War II housing in Windsor. And they both got colon cancer simultaneously within a week of each other. So they said, if you want the buildings, they're yours. And I spoke to my grandfather, and at that time, the Ontario government was looking at enforcing rent controls. So the conclusion was, although it took a while to make the move, the conclusion was I was done. I couldn't, Canada was no longer my home. My grandfather said, it's not your home anymore. So over a period of time, we started looking. My grandfather wasn't alive when I left. He died a couple years before that. But that's pretty well how long it took in order to be able to get things together to be in that position. And I was a broker, and I was very successful. I was making a lot of money. But I didn't have any money. When I landed in the United States, I had $300,000 in my pocket because my taxes were 75% net effective. So I left, and I'm an extraordinarily lucky and very fortunate person to have the background that I've got. And I'm being taught from the people that I was taught from. And you can look on my website, you'll see a whole story on my family. But when I came here, I was able to do things in the United States that I could never have even imagined if I had stayed in Canada. Well, think of the amount of employees that I've had. When I've got 3 projects under construction, that's 600 employees. That could never have happened in Canada. Think of those things that I've accomplished here that I could never have done had I have stayed in Canada. Now, if the Canadian system wasn't as socialist as it is, I would have loved to stay in my country. But I couldn't, because I didn't have any money. Yeah, my house was paid for. Yeah, my Subaru was paid for. But I didn't have any money. And I was making more than everybody on my block combined. 75% net effective is a big chunk of tax. So I left. So the real answer, I guess, to your question, because nobody's ever asked it like that, yeah, I got a chip on my shoulder. I'm pissed off that I was forced to leave, and I'm even more pissed off now that I'm seeing this whole thing play out again right in front of my eyes. I'm not running away. I'm here. I'm going to point this problem out. And if we get really lucky, other people will understand what's going on and start filing lawsuits against all these criminals.
Or look under the hood, like you said.
File the lawsuits. When you look under the hood, you'll find the crime. It's right there. We've got it. That's the beauty of the website. That's why we put it together, is to give people, here's the evidence. All you got to do is substitute your numbers. Here's our spreadsheets. All you got to do is plug your numbers in. We even did just yesterday an analysis for Johnson County on the housing affordability. So we're getting to the point now where we can actually look at a county and create a spreadsheet on its actual housing affordability and show how the fraud is being committed on that one thing alone, just for those houses. Never mind everything else. And that lines up with the DAs and the sheriffs. Prosecute these clowns. Or you can go to the governments, the states, and say, you've got a problem here, all the way up. And if this ends up in Glenn Hagar's lap, Mr. Hagar, you've got a problem. You're a co-conspirator in a criminal conspiracy to defraud. break the system. The system is broken. They broke it. It's their fault. They chose not to adhere to the laws. It's their problem. Everybody that's a taxpayer has agreed that, okay, we're paying property taxes, et cetera, until the point that they realize, oh crap, you've stolen all my money and I'm bankrupt. And that's where we are. We're at the tipping point.
Why do you think it's a good idea to reach out to the realtor community?
Realtors, the reason why it's so important is multiple issues. Realtors touch appraisers in their daily lives, right? Realtors and appraisers are side by side. Appraisers, as you saw in the video with Jeremy Bagot, are being instructed, commanded to commit fraud, or they will lose the assignment, or they will be fired. Well, that backs up on the realtors. The realtors can't say, well, we want to turn a blind eye. On a personal level, they can't say it because they are mom and pop. They're in the exact same boat as a person who owns a $200,000 home or as a person that owns a $2 million home. The taxes that are being levied on overvaluation, thus causing overtaxation, are a straight up fraud. Period, end of paragraph. So if a realtor says, my client wants to enter into a bidding war, let's take this up a notch. The realtor, A, is getting paid a commission to do so. He thinks he's helping that person, but the reality is, can you imagine what will happen in 6 months or a year from now when that person can't make the payments on the $1.1 million? What did the realtor really do? Well, the realtor participated in a problem. Is the realtor guilty? Well, if the realtor was smart, they'd have that buyer sign off and say, yes, I want to overpay for this house. If the realtor is not smart, then the realtor could be sued and could potentially lose because that home buyer would say, I was induced. Okay? And that's why it's so important. People have got to be aware of what's going on. When those realtors go to a CAD and the realtor doesn't understand that the CAD has committed fraud in terms of the numbers, that realtor unintentionally was induced to participate in a system that is a fraud. This backs up on everybody. Nobody is not responsible here.
So
These laws being broken literally add up to a system that is designed to defraud. So the people are participating in a system as unwilling and people that don't even know what the values are. But when you go to a CAD and you understand that everything you see coming out of a CAD is a fraud, you have the right to say, wait a minute, what is the real value of this to my client? Now, if your client says, I don't give a damn what you say, Mr. Realtor, I want to buy this house, my wife wants me to buy this house, I'm buying it, and that person has the money, Godspeed, amen. The problem is, it's what you don't know that's going to come back to bite. So not only are the realtors mom and pop, they're going to get screwed on their own property taxes, they know their friends and family are getting screwed. Now, with regard to the clients, how do you protect the client from getting into a bidding war? How do you protect the client from what is the real value? Well, we're right back to the issue. You have to actually look at the income of that client and say, can you afford this? And what the fellow was saying before about the servicing agents requiring taxes being paid. I mean, this is so sick and twisted and so deep. Think of those people that have to pay those taxes in advance. The servicing company comes in and says, by the way, you owe us based on what this CAD said are your taxes on a fraudulent number. Give us that money in advance. They don't have the money. That literally puts them in default right on the spot. Who did it? The servicing agent. People are completely blindsided because they don't understand the most simple basic element of all of this, where it really comes from. There is no CAD that is producing a legitimate value under any definition in law. Everything we spoke about here today stems from that one simple fact. There is no CAD that is producing a value, a legitimate value, under any definition in law. They can't give you the math to back up their comps because their comps aren't even comps. And it all falls down from there. This will eclipse it because in reality you're talking trillions of damage.
if the taxpayer doesn't get involved or fight, now you get hammered for the year coming. Is that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, and that's why this thing gets so
why
deep
it's
and
so
so twisted. Yeah, if you don't go in and protest, those CADs will literally double your value or triple your value the following year. 2 years down the road, you're right back fighting. You must fight every single year. You must use your legitimate comparisons in your area to stand up in front of them and say, no. There's a lot of realtors that are getting on these CAD boards. And I would suggest to you that those realtors are bad realtors. Those are the people that believe that their commission comes first. So when they get on a CAD board, think it through. When they get on a CAD board, well, the values have to be these values. Those realtors don't know the first thing about use. Perhaps they're doing the same thing. So you see the problem? Their ignorance and their greed is what's causing those people that are on the boards. And that's been a recent thing. I mean, over the last 5 years, a lot of these boards are being stuffed with realtors. Who put them there? The county judges. Who are the county judges? They make their money by getting their money from the taxpayer. So the system is so badly corrupted, the only solution is to eliminate the property taxes. There's no other way to do this because you have to eliminate the subjectivity. That is the only way to do this. So when you look at your own CAD board, be it in Plano, go and look. Figure out how many realtors are on those boards. The odds are that those aren't the people that you want in your company. You want people who actually give a damn. See, when you sell a house, remember, I was a broker, so I have sympathies, right? So when you sell a house, you have to have a seller and a buyer, willing seller, willing buyer, who both win. When you sell a commercial property or an industrial property, both sides have to win. Well, if you as the realtor didn't do the research to figure out how bad the tax situation was and the person buying can't afford it, well, that's not a win-win. You, the realtor, got paid, the seller got his money, the buyer has a higher probability of going bankrupt.
Less than 3 years.
So in 2008, in a subdivision that I built, there was about 38% turnover because they couldn't afford the homes. That's happening right now today. So the idea that this is not affecting $200,000 people, see, the point being that if you're in a $200,000, $300,000 home, that exact same situation translates into somebody that thinks of themselves as a multimillionaire. The reason why they're having problems is in this particular case, in 2 of the houses, the wife lost a job. In another house, they should never have bought it in the first place because they couldn't afford it. And big houses take big money to maintain. So you end up in a circular argument. Well, right now today, we're back to about 30%. Not 38, we're at 30% in that particular subdivision. When things go off the rails, which they will shortly just due to the debt load, I expect that to come pretty close to 50%. This is going to be bad. And that's what you're seeing. When you're starting to see houses back up in inventory, and you're starting to see CADs making assessments that are criminal assessments in violation of the Texas law, this has no choice but to implode. This will implode on its own, never mind the fact that we're doing this. The goal here is to stop it from imploding on its own and say, okay, let's get involved, let's fix it fast, give the people back the power so that they have a balance sheet of their own in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years when they go to retire. Because, by the way, Social Security won't be there either. So if you don't do this, you are going to turn this country into Venezuela. It's real simple. And Canada is gone totally socialist. Britain has gone totally socialist. They've got riots in the streets. When people run out of money, people become desperate. When people become desperate, they do desperate things. This cannot be shoved under the carpet. This is real. It's here now, as you've seen when you did the analysis. These houses are backing up. Now, what are you going to do when, let's just for sake of conversation, that's 5,000. What are you going to do when another 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 hit the market and the exact same thing happens? Wow. This touches everybody. You could be a billionaire because why? Your staff, they all have houses. What are you going to do when they can't afford it? They come knocking on your door saying, I'm going broke. I don't have the money to pay. Mr. Billionaire with 500 employees, what are you going to do?